Hello everyone, and welcome to another mini sky tonight, and happy Asteroid Day. So it's one of those little holidays in astronomy that we like to celebrate for the random objects that exist between the orbit of Mars and the orbit of Jupiter. So if you get a chance, check out some of the unique sites that are hosted by NASA for Asteroid Day, or you can Google Asteroid Day and there's a ton of information about all the interesting asteroids that you can see up in our sky. So tonight I wanted to show you some of the constellations you can see around about the 4th of July. I understand for many people, because of COVID-19, that many fireworks displays were canceled to keep everybody safe, and it's a really big bummer because I know I enjoy some of the fireworks displays around the 4th of July, and it's kind of hard to be able to imagine a year without them. So I decided to show you some of the wonders of the nighttime sky that you and your family can check out in lieu of being able to shoot some fireworks. So let's take a look at a couple of constellations that you can see this time of year. Over here towards the west, you kind of see this backwards question mark in the sky. This is the constellation Leo the Lion. Now, just to give you folks a reminder that this is the program called Stellarium. It is a free planetarium program that you can download onto your computer, and it's easy to use. You can see meteor showers, planets, satellites, and other things that you can do with this to be able to interact and learn about our sky and some of the wonders that you can display as well. So one of the unique things you can do is you can bring up all the constellations. So let's do that. So as I mentioned, there's this backwards question mark over here. This is the constellation Leo the Lion with the bright star Regulus down here at the chest of the lion. And the great thing about the program Stellarium is that it gives you all this wonderful information that you never thought you could understand or know about a particular object. You just simply left click on an object and it will tell you a lot about it. And if you want that information to go away, you just simply right click. But nonetheless, here you have the constellation Leo the Lion, and many of the other springtime constellations, like for example over here, you see the infamous Big Dipper, but it's a part of the constellation Ursa Major, the Great Bear. But let's look at a few summertime constellations, and we can do that by simply turning to face south. So facing south, you can see this J-shape or hook-shaped constellation in the south. To the Polynesians, they call this constellation Maui's fishhook. So if you've seen the Disney movie Moana, they talk about this constellation because it is an actual constellation in the sky. To us, we call it Scorpius, the scorpion. In the center of the Scorpius is the bright star Antares, which is a supergiant star that is expected to go supernova between now and the next few million years. So don't hold your breath, but keep an eye out for it. Who knows? It may all of a sudden go supernova in our lifetime. But over here towards the left of Scorpius is the constellation Sagittarius, which kind of looks like a teapot. But in the constellation Sagittarius right now is the beautiful bright moon. And let's zoom in on the moon because on the 4th of July, it'll be close to full. So if you can't see fireworks, you can at least see the beautiful bright moon. And allow me to show you some fun things that you can see on the surface of the moon if you have a pair of binoculars or small telescope. So this is what our moon looks like up close and personal. The dark areas on the surface of the moon are what are called maria, which are Latin for the term seas, because ancient mariners thought there were oceans on the moon. In actuality, these are impact sites where a huge impact hit the surface of the moon and was deep enough to cause lava to fill up and create kind of like a little bit of a lake, and then it cooled off. So these are relatively new and smooth surfaces on the surface of the moon versus the tall areas, which are the lunar highlands. And some of these little circles are what are called craters because they are impact sites. In fact, the brightest one right here is called Tycho, or Tycho if I've heard it pronounced too, but I like to think of it, it's Tycho, kind of like the Dutch astronomer Tycho Brahe. Call it what you will. But one of the fun things I sometimes do with younger students is to show them different shapes or things that they can see on the surface of the moon. Some people say they see a man in the moon, some say a woman in the moon, and I've even heard a rabbit in the moon. And that's the great thing about looking at the surface of the moon, is that it's kind of like looking at clouds, and you can make fun shapes in the clouds. So if you want to do a fun activity with your kids, just have them look at the surface of the moon and try to see some of these fun shapes. So when I think of the man in the moon per se, I see like, here's his eye, here's his other eye, and here's his mouth right here. So that's when I see a man in the moon. For many that see a woman in the moon, here's her eye, here's her mouth and her chin, her long neck, and here's her ear. And some say that her Tycho, the crater, is her gem necklace, and here's her long, beautiful flowing hair. And it took me a while to see this one, but I could now finally see it, is the rabbit in the moon. So here's the rabbit's long ears, here's his head, here's his front little legs, here's his body, his back little legs, and there's his little puff tail right there. So if you want to have something fun to do with your kids, look for the different shapes in the moon. To the left of the moon, you'll see these kind of two bright stars, which are not a part of constellation at all. They are the planets Jupiter and Saturn. So let's take an up close and personal look at some of these planets. So during the 4th of July, you'll see what looks like 3 Galilean moons, but there's actually 4 there. 2 of them are really close together. So it looks like 3, but there's actually 4. The reason being why they're called the Galilean moons is because they were first discovered by Galileo Galilei. He was using his telescope to look up at the nighttime sky, and he came across these random little objects that went around the planet Jupiter. And it gave him some solid evidence to present the idea that the Earth was not the center of our solar system, because these objects went around Jupiter rather than the Earth. But nonetheless, the great thing about this program called Stellarium is you can take a zoom in on these different objects. So allow me to zoom in on these 2 that look like really close to each other in the sky, because these are 2 of the awesome moons around Jupiter that I wanted to show you guys. One of them is called Io. I like to call it the cheese pizza moon, because it literally looks like the surface of the moon looks like a cheese pizza. And that's because it's a volcanic moon. There are active volcanoes on the surface of Io. And the reason being is because Jupiter's gravity is literally causing these volcanoes. It's not like tectonics like what we have here on the surface on Earth. What's going on in Io is literally the gravitational tugs of Jupiter is literally pulling the moon inside out. Crazy. And of course, right next to it is the moon Europa, which astronomers believe that there is a liquid ocean underneath the surface of ice. It's literally a gigantic ice ball. And the reason being why they believe that there's an ocean underneath the surface of Europa is because they notice the cracks change over the course of time. And they fill with this kind of dark brownish material. So they believe that these cracks are due to the shifts in the ocean underneath the surface of the ice. And those cracks then literally fill up, and as soon as the water reaches the surface, it freezes. And of course, if you have a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, you'll see kind of an image of Jupiter that looks like this. It looks like a beautiful round sphere that has brown and white tinges to it. These are the bands of Jupiter, and these are the cloud tops that you can see with a pair of binoculars or a small telescope. Now, some of these extra names that you see right next to the planet are also moons of Jupiter that were discovered later, but they're really hard to see. So hence why it's easier just to look at the Galilean moons with a pair of binoculars or a telescope. They kind of look like stars right next to the planet. And of course, over to the left of Jupiter, you have the planet Saturn. Let's take a look at this beautiful planet. Saturn, the Lord of the Rings. It is a beautiful ringed planet. Now, all gas giant planets have rings. It's just Saturn's is the most epic. But one of the fun facts I always, or two of the fun facts I should say, one of the fun facts I always enjoy is that Saturn's rings are incredibly thin. The average thickness of the rings is the same distance between the two goalposts on an American football field. It's that thin. So the average distance of something so tiny on the surface of the Earth is the thickness of the rings of Saturn. Crazy, right? And also one of the other fun facts that I always enjoy about Saturn is incredibly light for its size. I like to call it the rubber ducky of the solar system, because if you were to put Saturn into a pool, it would float. It's crazy. But one of the moons I always enjoy of Saturn is the moon called Titan. So let's take a look into Titan. Now, Titan is the only moon in our solar system to have an atmosphere. That's why astronomers were really interested in it, and we sent a probe to the surface of Titan, where they discovered oceans and lakes of liquid ethane and methane and other surface features. In fact, if you go to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory's website and look up Titan, you'll get to see beautiful images from the surface of this moon. Now, as you can see, Saturn has a ton of moons. In fact, to date, it's 62 and counting. And the reason being is because Jupiter and Saturn are huge gas giant planets. And since they are so big, they have a ton of gravity. And because of their gravity, they constantly pull random objects into themselves and cause them to fall into orbit. So let's look over here towards the east to see these three bright stars that kind of form a triangle. This is what is known as the Navigator's Triangle, or the Summer Triangle. Navigators used to use these three stars for navigation on the ocean. The brightest star at the top right here is called Vega. Vega is a really unique star because in astronomy, it's used as a standard. We use it as like a magnitude standard, where magnitude 0 was defined to be Vega. Anything brighter than it would be a negative number. Anything dimmer than that would be a positive number. Meaning like the distance away, like because of Vega, if it was at a standard distance and a standard brightness, if it was to get closer, it would look this bright. If it would get farther away, it would look this bright. So for example, the Sun is negative 26 magnitude because it's so incredibly close and incredibly bright. Versus the faintest object that you can see with your unaided eye is roughly around about a magnitude 5. Nonetheless, Vega is in the constellation Lyra, the lyre. L-Y-R-E, not L-I-A-R. It's a harp. But hidden between the two bottom stars of the constellation Lyra is a really unique object. In fact, let's zoom in on it. Now, you won't be able to see these bright colors when you look into it with a pair of binoculars or a telescope. And the reason being is because our eyes are limited to how much information we can retrieve. Whereas the unblinking eye and collectors from a CCD camera can keep gathering information and light to produce these beautiful colors that you see. Now, the Ring Nebula is what is known as a telltale sign of what will happen to our star when it passes away. What's going on in our sun right now is a process called nuclear fusion, which basically takes lighter elements, rams them together to create heavier elements to form light, heat, and energy. Well, eventually it's going to start running out of lighter elements, so then it'll start fusing heavier elements to try to keep going. And it'll start to fuse helium, and then it'll try to fuse carbon, and then it'll try to fuse nitrogen and oxygen, and so on down the periodic table. Eventually, it's going to start running out of material to be able to start fuse. So what it will do is it will collapse down its core to try to maintain whatever material it has left to try to keep fusing, and it'll puff out its outer layers. So our star is not going to go epic explosion like some big stars in our galaxy. Our sun will just simply go poof, and that's it. It'll create this cosmic ash ball or cocoon around our star and the core remnant. In fact, the tiny little star in the center there is the core remnant of the star that once was. In astronomy, we call it a white dwarf star because it's literally the mass of the sun squeezed into the size of the planet Earth. All right, some of the last things I wanted to show you guys is 2 more planets that you can see in the early morning sky. So for you early morning risers, allow me to show you a couple things that you can see in the early morning sky while you're out and about. So let's take off the constellation lines and bring up what the sky will look like roughly in the early morning. Another fun thing you can do with the program Stellarium is to change the date and time. So let's take a look at the date and time, roughly around about July 5th and early in the morning, right before sunrise. So let's do 5:30, give or take. So if you look over here towards the southwest, you'll still see the moon with Jupiter and Saturn, but directly above your heads is the planet Mars. It'll look like this bright orange star right directly above your heads. And then over here towards the east, you'll see this bright star, these 2 bright stars close together, and this cluster of stars back here. This bright star is the planet Venus. So just like how a couple of months ago was the early evening sky, now it's in the early morning sky. This little cluster of stars is gone by several different names. It's gone by the 7 sisters, the 7 Indian maidens, the 7 little eyes of Madarihi, the Pleiades, or Subaru. Yeah, Subaru is Japanese for the Pleiades. So when you look on the emblem of a Subaru vehicle, you'll see these stars. In fact, many things on our market today are named after celestial objects. You got 4 Tauruses, Orion Navigators, Milky Way bars, Mars bars, Sirius Radio, all sorts of stuff. In fact, let's take a up close and personal look. So yes, even all these individual stars in the Pleiades have specific names. So this is basically an open cluster within our galaxy, and these are baby stars. That light blue haze is the last of the nebula that created the stars. And it's one of the few objects that in our nighttime sky that you can see with your unaided eye. So these are just a few fun things that you can see up in the early evening and the early morning sky around about July 4th, July 5th. So if you can't go watch some fireworks, check out some of these wonders of the nighttime sky with your family. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments below. If you have any suggestions for topics, just leave them down in the comments and I'll be happy to cover over them as well. Also, for you parents, if you're looking for activities for your kids for the summertime, I know with COVID-19, a lot of the pools, sports, activities have been canceled because of this mess. And my heart goes out with you. I've been looking forward to some of those events myself, and it was kind of devastating when I found out a lot of those got canceled. But fortunately, there are resources available to help entertain your kids as well as to provide some education. One of those activities is Future Ready SA, which provides badges. Like, it basically gamifies learning to where these kids can earn a badge to do these fun activities with their family. My personal favorite is they have an astronomy badge to where you can do all these fun astronomy types of activities to learn unique things about our sun, learn unique things about our galaxy, and so on. So if you want to check those out and have your kids learn some awesome things, I will leave a link down in the description below. Also, if you're interested in possibly a telescope viewing or a live sky tonight, just let me know down in the comments below and I'd be happy to work something out with you folks. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, never stop learning. Happy 4th of July, everybody.